Hey everyone, it's Will, Gamer Dad, with another video for you. So I've had a few requests about talking about Grasta setups, what works best, what kind of ores you should use, and kind of what to expect in terms of damage and modifying your units such that you can get the maximum damage either outside AF, within AF, or just overall farming. So I decided to make this back to basics video so that hopefully beginners and veterans can get some few tips from yours truly, Gamer Dad. Now, first of all, I'd like to say that I'm not an expert on this game, of course. I just play the game alongside with you anyways. However, I'll share some of the things I use and hopefully you can use some of those as well. I also do try to show my loadouts at most fight videos at the end of most boss fights so that you can kind of glean what is required for those fights. So that being said, we're going to approach it a little bit differently. So first off, we're going to use Aldo as our example here, and you can clearly see there is no Grasta equipped at all. And we're going to go back to one of my favorite places to kind of test out or just grind out mobs, Purgatory. And so since we have a fire-based unit, we're going to take on Wind, I believe. Now, if you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it. I also do have a Patreon account for those who want to support me this way. So what I wanted to show you is kind of what to expect damage-wise when you're first starting the game. And of course, this area or this part is mainly for beginners because, most of us at the end game do have enough damage. So note that I am using Iasakia only as demonstration, and I want to show what to expect damage-wise with no Grasta. So let's start it off here. So obviously, I'm doing quite a bit of damage, 322,000, and keep in mind that's only because I am using void weapons, and as I said, I can show you that here. Most beginners won't have this kind of power badges and weapons and armor and so on and so forth. So that's just as a base level for just kind of showing you what we can do. Now, at the end of chapter 46, when most people have started Guerrilla, what we're really looking for is when you're farming those areas, you probably would have farmed some of these fire type Grastas, either farmed them and upgraded them, or farmed them and kind of put them in, to use. And so most people will have the power of the blaze, in the case of fire. And note that for physical users, you really want to use power / speed, power 5, speed 5. For mages, you would use int 5, speed 5. I mean, you can get other combinations and they will still give you the 20% bonus on the blaze fire attacks. However, you don't get that speed and power bonus, which really helps for fighting, either outspeeding your mobs or even bosses. Alright, so just remember the first number, what we expected damage-wise. And let's try that again. Note that with the damage, we are expecting around 70% damage increase with that one upgrade in Grasta, provided you have all 3 Grastas in place. So again, this is 30% extra fire attack, 20% extra fire attack, and 20% extra fire attack for a total of 70% extra attack. Note that with the extra modifications with power, you do get a little bit more than that damage-wise. So it's not quite 70%, it's probably a little bit more than that. And so anyone who's finished chapter 46, eventually after grinding some time in Guerrilla Present Dungeon, will have those. And of course, make sure you collect all the junk, trade them in at the stores, because you really want those tier 3 Grasta, which is the Infernos, for example, much less some of the other elemental ones. And so again, for beginners to the game, the present day Guerrilla dungeon is really for elemental Grasta mainly. You don't have access to the next tier of Grasta, which we're going to show you right here. Once you finish chapter 55 or 56 or so, you'll have access to other types of Grasta, and what people really talk about the most is pain and poison Grasta. And so what that is note that these are enhanced, but I will talk about that a little bit later. If you do have these pain Grasta, they are meant for certain types of weapons only. They will enhance your damage by 30% when the target has pain. So let's put 3 of those on, just to compare the difference between 3 elemental Grasta and 3 Pain Grasta. Now note that these are yellow versus what some of you may have when you're still in chapter 50 something or 60 something and you haven't had access to these enhancements of Grasta. Now note that there's a second effect when you enhance the Grasta, and again I'll talk about that later, but you do have access to this enhanced Grasta system after chapter 74, which is the I guess Goddess of Time part 2. When you get the future Garrelia, and there's some other things there. So note that it does, when enhanced, occasionally inflict pain. That is actually a very big benefit for those who don't have a dedicated pain setter. Now in my demonstration here, we actually do have a dedicated pain setter. We have Iyasukiya here, which by the way, when she starts her, starts in the front, she inflicts pains on all enemies at the start of battle. So I'm not using her for damage here. I'm just using her to kind of show when you have a pain setter, what kind of damage you can get with these kind of hits. Okay, so note that, remember, we had about 500,000 in terms of damage. Look at the damage there against the weak enemy there, 700-ish. And keep in mind that normally if the enemy would have survived, that's 2 hits of 700. Also, one small thing of note is that when the enemy dies, you will have the effects fade. So the pain, of course, fades. Any debuffs, if you are putting debuffs on your enemies, would have faded. And so the number after killing an enemy, if you hit it additional times, would be less. But note that once you have 3 pain Grastas and a pain setter, the damage scales up quite a bit from the 500 mark to 700 mark. And keep in mind that as you do AF bars, the 700 mark will go even higher because every combo meter going up will increase your damage by that amount. Alright, so we've talked about what you have after getting a lot of pain and poison Grasta. Now, I didn't talk much about poison Grasta because, frankly speaking, there aren't many poison setters in the game. And so, really, I would highly recommend grinding more Antiquity Garrelia if you want a lot of pain and poison Grasta, and I said that mainly pain Grasta, although some units such as Suzette, Felmina do use poison Grasta and they work the same way. If you are in the early endgame where you have access to both Antiquity Garrelia as well as Future Garrelia, you can use both dungeons to grind those Grasta. However, I find in my experience, I got a lot more pain and poison Grasta from the Antiquity Garrelia. Not to mention, you can actually trade in 20 bones to one of the traders in Zami, which is the kind of the store there, and you can actually buy them if they have them in stock. One other thing to note is that with pain damage versus say type damage is actually additive. So when we say 30, 20, 20, it really is 30 plus 20 plus 20% for a total of 70. When it comes to pain, it's not 30% plus 30% plus 30% for 90%. We're talking 1.3 times 1.3 times 1.3, and I think that ends up being something like 2.16. And so you're getting, 216% damage as opposed to 170% damage. So you can correct my math if I'm wrong, but I know it's definitely more than 90%. And so that's why everyone uses Pain Grasta when you see those end game fights. Alright, so we finished talking about Pain and Poison Grasta. Now there are some next tier of Grasta that is available once you get to a certain point of the story. And so this is after chapter 70, I was going to say 74 or so. Now, we'll just warp there for those who aren't familiar with what we're expecting. Once you get to something called Hidden Village Itois, and I know this is a spoiler alert for those who haven't finished it, you'll have access to this system right here. And when you talk to this guy, you can upgrade Grasta that you have already. So the blue Grasta is the Grasta that has not been upgraded, and the yellow or amber color is the one that you have upgraded. And keep in mind, you have the revert function where you can actually remove the secondary effect from the Grasta that you've upgraded, or you can just use another what they call ore that drops in those new future Garrelia dungeons, as well as the newest Underworld dungeon. Underworld dungeon is available after the main story is finished, which is chapter 84. You can really start squeezing out damage from some of your existing Grasta. And so I'll just show you a couple of things here. I'm not going to upgrade because I have a lot of Grasta upgraded already, but I'll just give you an example here. So when we select it, you can actually override it, which we will not do. Note that when we add certain Grasta, it affects the original Grasta. So initially, the top dotted effect is the type attack plus 25 for all those who have this personality or P for our multi-power cooking. So you look at the personalities, if it matches, you get 25%. Note that when you do upgrade it with this particular ore, the dormant ore, you get the shared ability where if someone has it, anyone else on the team that's in your front or back line will also get this ability for the duration of the fight, while even if the person has died or has gotten stoned or whatever. The effect is continuous for as long as the person's on your team. There are a lot of different Grasta, some of which you'll see in Chapter 84 when you get to the Future Gyaralia dungeon. Other ones you see after Chapter 84, such as these ones, like this combo rate enhance, essentially turns your unit, for example, into a mini Victor. I haven't really found much use of this because I haven't really employed it. However, I'm sure you can leave some comments below. Let me know if you found the combo rate enhance or extremely useful. I do think that if you have enough lightning units such as Victor, ES Melina, and so on and so forth, even Yuri, for example, work really well on Slash Team. You might not need this to enhance your combo rate since you're probably getting enough combo rate increase from the likes of Skull as well. There are some of these where for every 10 light or shadow, you get an extra 1 stat of these speed, endurance, and luck and stuff like that. Again, can't say I'm using that as a mainstay on my teams. Maybe someone who wants to grind the numbers out can tell you if they're more effective than, say, General 3 Pains plus enhancements. There's some other ones that can have some utility for kind of affecting fights. Some for running. Now, these aren't really damage types. The one you're looking for damage-wise that people are using, I will mention this as a special one. You can enhance certain Grasta to put a 9 lives on yourself. And so if you have max HP, you can take a fatal hit and still stay alive, which is very useful against some super boss fights. There's also a badge that can do so. So again, that's more for survivability and not for damage. When it comes to damage, what everyone talks about is these 3. Rose with Thorns ore. And so note that when you add it to any Grasta, including Pain Grasta, you'll get this secondary effect, which is MP consumption attack, increases damage by 15%, but also increases MP consumption by 50%, not stackable. So you only need one of those enhanced on one of your 3 Grasta slots. Now, first of all, some people will say, hey, Will, 50% extra MP consumption, I'm not going to survive the fight. I'm going to drain my MP before it's over. The whole point of using these kind of upgraded Grasta is for really, anywhere from 2 to 4 turns fight. So you can use the Melissa setup, for example, or really powerful frontline DPS. If you can run a 1 or during using these abilities during AF, remember that during AF, MP does not get drained, and so you're really not having any disadvantage. However, you're increasing your damage by 15%. And again, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is multiplicative as well. So again, it's similar to the Pain where you get the 1.3 times 1.3. I believe this is times 1.15 on top. And so I know there's a lot of numbers, but the whole thing is more damage, lots more damage. Now, again, another question some people ask, hey, Will, it's only 15%. What's the big deal? In most AFs, if you can get some big numbers out there, you can get from, like, let's say one hit is 10 million. That's an extra 1.5 million. And if you do that 3 or 4 rounds, you can see that that's an extra 5, 6, 10 million potential, or even more if you have top level DPS. These are the types of things that really squeezes out those 2-turn AFs where you kill it to the HP stopper, and then when you come out of AF, that's when you start winning really hard, 1-hit KO. Okay, enough of that. Second one everyone uses, that I also use as well, is the Last Stand Ore. Again, most paired with my Pain Grasta. So again, my usual setup is 3 Pain Grasta. I have a Pain Setter on my team, dedicated Pain Setter on my team, and there's a few of them. So if you don't have ES Zakia, you can use things like AS Leclerc, Elga with Manifest, Renri with Manifest. There's a bunch out there, so I won't list too many of them. But the whole point is, we go with 3 Pain Grastas, and we enhanced each of the Grasta with one of the 3 I'm showing here. So the second one here is called Last Stand, which gives you the enemy numbers effect. That one gives you 30% additional damage for each additional enemy in the battle. So again, if you have 3 mobs, that is 60% extra damage, everyone. If you have 5 mobs or 1 boss plus 4 minions, that is an extra 120% damage from what I understand. It continues on as many enemies are on the screen, 30% additional. So obviously if you only have 1 enemy or 1 single boss, this is not as useful. Once you have a pair of bosses, for example the twins or the dual Hachio Eastern Spear Horrors, you're already getting 30% at the very minimum. And if they summon minions, you can start getting mega attacks after that. So very, very, very useful. Even outside boss fights, you will be using this for overworld or dungeon farming, because why are you not enhancing your damage by 30 to 60% as you're walking through dungeons and killing off multiple mobs? And finally, the last one we'll talk about here is the insult to injury or enhanced weak point damage. So again, if you know what the boss is that you're fighting is weak to, and either through trial and error or just losing or watching other videos, looking at subreddits or Google, so on and so forth. If you know they're weak to the element or weapon type that you have, extra 10%, not stackable. So again, you can't use 3 insult to injuries. You have to use 1 of this, 1 of this, and 1 of this. You're really going to squeeze out a lot of damage. And again, let me emphasize, this is on top of all those extra multipliers, the buffs and debuffs you have, the base stats you have with power badges, and so on and so forth. So as you add equipment that gives you, for example, type attack up, or you have moves that give you power up, or so on and so forth, these all add additional damage to your team. Really, really powerful stuff. So I'll talk a little bit about these pain enhance and poison enhance. So you'll probably see some videos out there that uses Palm as a technique, and Palm can have a move that poisons everybody, including those on your team. Well, when you poison everyone on your team and you know that, you can use one of these in place of one of the 3 that I mentioned above to give you 50% extra damage instead of, say, insult to injury, which only gives you 10%. Downside to this is that poison doesn't always land on your team. Every unit has a natural resistance to poison, so it's got a little bit more RNG to it. And likewise, if you have certain fights that you know that the enemy is inflicting poison, I'm looking at you, Yasuzume, then you can use this to enhance your damage instead of the 1. Alright, so hopefully that explains the basics of that. So you can definitely come back here and enhance some Grasta, and so I already have those pre-enhanced, and so I'm just going to equip them on to show you what is the difference wise when we do that versus others. So we're going to put the enemy numbers one. We are going to put the let me see what I have here. Weak point. I should have 1 of each. I usually actually have farmed enough, so I kind of leave them on different weapon types and just move the Grasta around when I'm done. Okay, this one's poison enhanced, so I don't have one for the MP consumption, and so I'm just going to leave that off, but you understand the idea. So let's go back to our friends in Purgatory and slap them around a little bit more. I'm hoping this video isn't too boring for everyone. I really just did want to show, since I have so many questions about Grasta and why things are being used, and you don't even have to understand the numbers. At the very least, when it says enhanced damage by X amount, just use them, and I think you'll have some pretty good success. I mean, again, if you want to use damage formulas, there are those on Mirahees, which is our Google. Okay, so remember that we did about 700, I think, last time. Yeah! We're going for 1 million now, everyone. So remember, remember we had 700,000 with 3 pain Grastas. We enhanced them with just 2 additional benefits, and we're essentially 50% more damage. 1 million already. And again, this is outside AF just for fun. Alright, so we've talked about all that. Now, is there more that we can do Grasta-wise? So, I will show you one additional Grasta that's available after Chapter 83. You will actually find one on your way through playing with the main story. But for those who aren't aware, and I'm sure most of you are aware of this, there is one called the Bullseye Ore. You see that? Look at that ability. If not in AF, the damage is 50% not stackable. So, just imagine that. we have now the enemy numbers, we have the weak point, and we have an additional 50%. So you want to see the numbers on how they scale up. You can imagine the numbers is going to be bigger, but this is why I wanted to kind of like showcase. Because once you start adding all these things, you can experiment with the damage and see how much you can get out there. 1.6 now instead of 1 million. So again, note that it's not scaling up directly at 50%. You're adding tons and tons of damage for literally just grinding out these ores and things in the dungeon. And so I will say, don't be too upset if you don't have the ores or have the Grasta or have the power ability to kill off, say, the newest super bosses and so on and so forth. As you grind through all the different dungeons as you progress through the different points in the game, depending on where you are, you'll come across these as, even though they're rare drops, you'll come across them, or you can even trade them in at the store as you go through the dungeons, and you'll eventually get those. Okay, so is there more that we can do? I'm just going to touch on a couple of other things here. So note that we had the pain plus weak point damage, which is 10% extra and 30% extra, remember that. There are actually Grastas later on that you can get that enhance weak point damage. So instead of having pain plus weak point damage, you just have straight weak point damage increased by 50%. I'm not going to demonstrate that. You can understand the numbers are going to be crazy and additive as well. Extremely powerful, and one benefit of the weak point strike Grasta, note that this has to be enhanced after chapter, well, you won't even get this until chapter 80 something, but you'll have to enhance this with dormant ores, which are unlocked from the future Garrelia Grasta system to get this to 50%. I think the base level is 30%. They are not stackable, so do not use this with the weak point insult to injury or enhancement. However, still very, very useful, and you'll use this in times that the enemy is resistant to pain. So for example, say you have 3 pain Grasta, but the enemy either resists pain or there are negative benefit to inflicting pain or so on and so forth. Then you will have to change up your Grasta. Instead of using 3 pain Grastas, you'll use weak point Grastas. You can use elemental Grastas, which we showed you, those tier 3 ones, and so on and so forth. Now, there are a few other ones that I'll just talk about without equipping them. And again, I do apologize for the long video. I hope that you do understand kind of my thought processes about equipping Grasta in general, and I know that people do different styles, so hopefully you just see my viewpoint and see if anything is interesting to you. So Power of Mind is a very kind of interesting hybrid Grasta. It starts off with giving you 30% crit rate, and then if you enhance it with a dormant ore, it gives you 25% type attack. So for those who are not familiar with the terms, that essentially means anyone who has a sword, you'll enhance their elemental damage by 25%. So, instead of having a fire Grasta that enhances by 20 or 30%, it just gives you a straight 25. And again, these are additive to any other elemental or fire type boosts on Aldo, for example. Not too bad. However, eventually these Grastas won't be used nearly as often because you'll probably have a crit rate setter that gives you 100% crit rate. Again, I can give you a few examples. There are things like Mayumfa, for example. There's Miyu AS helps increase. Sukiya AS, the list goes on and on and on. So these Grastas are useful when you don't have a crit setter. Oh, not only that, but if you do beat some of the Hachio dual spirit horrors, you'll get void swords or void weapons that give you guaranteed crit 100. So that's why this one falls down the list a little bit. Still useful in certain setups, and you can experiment with that, especially when you don't have access to the later Grastas because you're still in the mid game. Same thing with the Power Absorb Grasta. It absorbs 1% of inflicted damage and gives you type attack when you enhance it with dormant ores. Still gives you 25% type attack, not bad. Pain will deal more damage in general. However, there might be situations that you need to absorb damage in order to not die. And I think that's pretty much it with these kind of Grastas. There's some other Grastas, but I'm not going to touch on most of these because they don't really enhance damage. Now, there's a few other interesting ones here. Note that the Sword Prayer sword is something called True Sword's Prayer. And so you'll see, again, some players and some videos use something like Sword's Prayer, Lance's Prayer, so on and so forth. What you do, you have a unit that carries a sword or that can equip this Grasta, and then you equip this move as one of the 3 move slots instead of their normal moves. And what that does is, a true Sword's Prayer, when you cast that ability, is a guaranteed 100% chance of increasing all the frontline sword-bearing unit damage by 50%. So in certain areas or times that you need that additional damage, a Sword's Prayer or a Lance's Prayer or so on and so forth will give you the edge you need to win the battle. Again, I try not to use that in general because I prefer to use units with their original moves. However, hey, still an additional avenue to squeeze out damage if you need. And again, this one is another interesting one. Primarily, I use it for AS Clark. However, you can use it in other things. And this one really is beneficial during longer fights, such as multiple waves, such as Battle Simulator, aka Boss Rush. It increases your Lunatic turns by 2. So instead of 3-turn Lunatic, you get 5-turn Lunatic. That's usually enough for all but the most protracted battles. And finally, you can enhance those on top, and note that I just put the enemy's numbers because I put that on Clark and I had the other kind of interesting Grasta to complement that. Okay, so is that the end of the video? No, there's actually one more thing I wanted to mention. So we've gotten to the point where we've added all those pain Grastas, we've enhanced everything, we have a pain setter, we're doing more and more damage. Is there anything else we can do? Yes. And this particular technique is available after chapter 74. So we're just going to bring up any sword user, and we'll bring up a loser one for a change, just for fun, because I'm sure there are players who kind of like to bring around knights, rainbow sisters, and bots. And so keep in mind that they can equip Grasta as well. And what we use the term Grasta slave, what we mean is we are going to use them to share abilities of Grasta with your units. And what does that mean? Well, okay, so once you get to the enhancements with Dormant Ore, note that some of these Grasta, which again, a lot of these Grasta are available through the shops in Zami, Nagsham. There are also a few Grasta such as the Almighty Power Grasta, which gives type attack to certain personalities. Those are from the Regen Worm, and so you'll have to go through my playlist to check out certain fights and what you can get. Or you can go to the subreddit and look at the, I think there is a kind of like a roadmap version 2.9.1 on the subreddit that can tell you kind of what things you haven't conquered or tackled yet. As you come across the different Grasta in the game, you'll have the ability to get these ones, which I call them tier 3 Grasta. They all need Jadeite to enhance. So note that this ability is, when it's normal, it's damage plus 30 when HP is maxed. If you put it on the person, that's great. If I enhance it with Dormant Ore, you're getting damage plus 30% when at max HP for all party members that meet the requirement. So as long as Aldo, for example, still is max HP, Natore can share this ability to give 30% extra damage. And so the real awesomeness is that now you're getting the 3 Grasta that you have on Aldo, and you're getting the abilities of shared Grasta from other people that also give him awesome stuff. So we can now put on the Fire Inferno one, the max HP, and if he had any other weird personalities, you can share with him such that he gets even more. So what you usually do here is you would look at the guy's personality on his board. So he has sword, and that's pretty much it. Other players might have things like mask or glasses, and then you can enhance more. Okay, so one last example, everyone, and then we'll just do that right here. So remember the last time we showed damage, we were at 1.6 million or so. Am I correct? Now we have extra shared, and you can tell it's extra shared because if you look at the icons on Aldo, note that he has the extra HP max attack and the extra fire icon attack, that middle one on the bottom there. And that gives you 60% extra, right? 30 and 30. 30 for the fire, 30 for the HP max, he hasn't been hit yet, on top of all his pain and stuff. So, boom! 2 billion now, so 2.3. And that is where you squeeze out a lot of damage. So if you can spare one slot on your team, or for example, you have 2 bow units on your team, say a Claude and an Iesukia. Your Iesukia is your main DPS. You will use Claude as your lesser unit to carry Grasta and share as a slave for AES Sukiya, even though they both do damage and are in the front line. Claude is not relied upon for damage, he's relied upon for, say, support and debuffing. Then you use that to share, or if you have an extra slot in the back, like you don't have to carry 6 units, you can really share all those Grasta as well. Okay, so one small thing before we end the video. Note that we obviously have the pain, blah, 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 blah. Don't forget, once you start adding extra Grasta, such as the Dragon God's Might, which is again available after chapter 83, the end of the story, note that that increases the strength and crit damage by 30%. If you have enough light, you can also get extra Grasta, extra damage, and of course, what better thing to put than another pain Grasta? And this is where you really start squeezing out tons more damage. Now, actually, you don't even have to use the pain Grasta. Let's try something even more interesting. There is one that is new after chapter 73. Take a look at this one. Power of Deadly Blow Sword. Gives you extra speed. So note that there's no power bonus, which decreases your overall damage a little bit. However, increases strength by 30% when critical. And since we do have the Void Sword that gives you critical guarantee, I'll show you what the difference is when you have an extra Grasta slot and an VC Grasta as well. And so again, I know that although it's a unique case where free-to-plays like myself can grind that up to 255, most gacha units are not going to have that ability. So remember, we're going to target this guy, and we did 2.35 the last time with just the 3 shared Grasta, the 2 shared Grasta, 3 pains, and so on and so forth. Let's try. Not 2.3, 4.3, everyone. And so that is the secret of squeezing out every bit of damage in the game, as much as you can anyways, from the Grasta system. So anyways, I really hope that this longer video, and I apologize if it's a little bit boring, I hope this longer video does educate everyone about kind of what I think about the Grasta system, what I use to kind of prepare for boss fights or even overworld fights, and you know, trying to do as best we can given the units we have. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.